I am Dr. Lara Ervin-Kassab from San Jose State University's Department of Teacher Education. I'd like to thank you for joining me today for this webinar on meeting the challenge of online music education. So we have a couple goals for this webinar. The two goals are, first and foremost, you're going to hear what two music teachers are currently doing online. One is a band teacher who's going to be sharing with us how she has transitioned to online teaching, kind of the big picture. And then secondly, we'll be hearing from a choir teacher who's going to walk us through a lesson, including all of the things that he's doing online. The second part of this will be what was inspired by these interviews, which is an in-depth look at how we can guide student self-assessment while teaching online for growth as musicians. So our first interview is with Mrs. Lindsay Kellogg. She is the Director of Bands at Liberty High School in Brentwood, California. She's also the coordinator of the CCC Honor Jazz Band. Good morning, I'm here with Mrs. Lindsay Kellogg. She is the Director of Bands at Liberty High School. And I would like to welcome her to our webinar here for the CMEA. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am in my 15th year teaching. This is my third year at Liberty. Prior to being at Liberty, I taught for 12 years at Adams Middle School. And so yeah, I am in my third year rebuilding a program and have really kind of turned it around, and then COVID happened. And so here we are. And prior to starting my teaching career, I got my bachelor's and master's in music education at California University State in Chico. And then I also got my Kodai certification at McNeese University in Louisiana.
Awesome. So can you tell us a little bit more? You said you were rebuilding the program and then COVID happened. So how did the transition to online teaching, how did that go for you?
Yeah, it's actually been better than I expected. I did lose enrollment, which was a little bit, I guess, to be expected for all of us right now, but a little disappointing. This was a huge year. I went from about 100 or about 70 students when I got the program to about 130-ish last year. And this year I was slated to have about 195 in the marching program. I'm down to about 165 to 170. So not a huge drop, but enough that, you know, I'm disappointed that they aren't here, but I understand everybody has what's working best for them right now. So I was really excited for this fall marching season and to get my band out there, and we had our show picked and like every other band director that's out there. And so for me, I took the transition of keeping things as close to being in person as possible, but not in person. So I feel like the transition has gone smoother for my students because I've kept it, you know, everybody has their own philosophy and what they want to focus on right now. But for me, I wanted my class to run exactly how it would run in the classroom, just utilizing, you know, different resources to present it, and knowing that we would lose the ensemble piece. We can't hear each other and all of that. But otherwise, I think that helped the transition.
So how did you make that work? What have you actually done? A lot of us are very curious about the actual physical management of setting up. I know that you do sectionals with your students and you have section leaders. How does that all work, and how do you utilize your technology to make all that work?
So I'm still working out the kinks on this, and I'm honestly behind, and I'm really type A, so this is bothering me, but you know, we're learning as we're going, and then we're getting the programs we need and filling out our POs and doing what we need to do. And I think I'm pretty good with tech, but I'm not tech savvy, and you know, I'm not an audio editor or any of that kind of stuff, but I'm learning as I go. I've been creating or having colleagues help me create, depending on, you know, the level of, you know, expertise needed, click tracks for my students, so that there's a metronome that will click them in prior to me playing the song through Zoom. It's weird because I never in my concert band settings, I mean, we would listen to music, but I never wanted my students to rely on a recording to learn to play. I wanted them to count and do the rhythms and do everything. And we still are doing that. But I mean, the reality is like, I have to play the recording. They can't hear anybody else. So I have to play it during class. So that has helped them be successful so that we all start at the same time. Because otherwise it's really hard to line up playing. I'll cut it, you know, and chunk it down for them into different sections. So that's one thing that I've been doing to run the ensemble music. We've also been either inputting into, my section leaders have been working on this with me, either into Noteflight or Sibelius or into a music scanner program, their individual parts. So getting that notated, and that's been slow. That's just now rolling out. It took me some time to work with them and me some time to figure out what is the best way to get them. So because a lot of the kids need to hear their own part. So like while playing the ensemble music's great, they're used to hearing their buddy next to them in class, or I can ask them to play individually. I feel like Zoom, we're starting to get to the point where I could ask some kids to unmute and play, but they're also uncomfortable as it is that, you know, when I would ask them to play in class in front of me and give them feedback, I just, in the classroom setting in this atmosphere, I don't think it's the same. A lot of them aren't comfortable. So we're doing that with the parts. We do breathing exercises every day, and I screen share the breathing gym for them. And so those are kind of the tech pieces that I've been using. We use Canvas at Liberty, so I really like Canvas. I'm able to link click tracks for them to use to practice at home, and my section leaders have it. I'm able to then assign all of the individual tests that they submit to me, and that's where they're getting their feedback at this point, where normally in the band setting, it would be in class to the whole ensemble. And then we're going to take all of those click tracks and put them into a virtual performance, which will be the end result. And so I think that helps the kids too, knowing that they have an end result coming up soon. They're not just playing this music to play it. I also use Sight Reading Factory, which is, I know a lot of music educators utilize that. It embeds right into Canvas. We can do group exercises, screen share that, the metronome, it'll play the sound for them so we can practice our rhythms and sight reading, which I usually do that in the classroom anyway and screen share it on my TV. But now we can just do it to the whole class over Zoom.
Excellent. And how are you giving feedback? Is it yourself or your section leaders, or both, giving feedback to students to guide them on improving performance, moving towards the ensemble?
I listen to every recording and put comments. It's a ton of grading. I have never graded. I mean, I don't want to say I don't grade, because I do, but this is a lot of grading. I mean, there's a reason I didn't become an English teacher to grade a bunch of essays, you know, besides that I love teaching music. It's a lot of grading. It's a lot of grading. I listen to a lot of recordings. It's tough too, because, you know, you can't really grade on things like tone that you would normally grade in class or give feedback on. So like the tone and the balance and blend, all of that, I feel like is going to have to start all over again when we're back in person. Because you don't know if it's their mic quality or an echo in their room or any of that. So we're really giving feedback on, you know, they can do dynamics and stuff a little bit, depending on their mic situation. We're giving feedback on technique, rhythms, correct notes, stuff like that. So that's on the music side. And then I'm still trying to keep some of my marching going, which is, we just got approved to start in pods for some conditioning, so I can do some of the fundamentals in person after break. But I'm just having them stand up in Zoom, and I'm trying to teach them some of the basics of marching, because I don't want to have to step back in when the time comes and have to reteach everything. I know we'll have to go back over it, but I use a program that we purchased called Basics in a Box. There's a music educator out there that has this available, and it's not that I don't know how to teach the marching stuff, because it kind of teaches you how to teach it, but she has some YouTube videos that are in there that I can then stream to the students or link back into Canvas for reference. You know, if they didn't catch it the first time when I went over it, or they couldn't tell where my feet were because they're looking at a square, didn't know how to pin my video, they have that to go back and look at themselves. So I think that that's been helpful for the marching aspect.
Awesome. And now, did your students, when this whole thing kind of happened, did your students have access to technology, or has the school supported you in getting the technology that the students need out to the students?
Yeah, so our school, I'm not exactly sure the process that they took, but it was some sort of a survey for students who needed either hotspots or laptops. So every student is on my Zoom with a camera. They're not allowed to, well, I mean, they're still figuring out the guidelines, but for me, for a performing arts class, like their camera needs to be on because I need to be able to see it. And then, you know, at the beginning when they said I don't have a camera, I said, then you need to call the school and get a laptop. And so they provide one for you. So yeah, all the kids, I mean, all my kids are on, you know, everybody has their own tech issues. You know, the internet's not working. My video won't come on today or whatever. I mean, I think that's normal, but they're all equipped with the right equipment.
Fabulous. So then I want to thank you for joining me today here, and just would like to ask, what advice would you give to others, either teachers who are currently teaching, or I'm at San Jose State and we have a whole bunch of really great credential students who we're all still trying to figure out how to make this transition to online. And hopefully we'll go back, but it's still good to keep in your back pocket that we have the ability to teach online. So what kind of advice would you give to other educators?
I really think keeping it simple and then really like your regular classroom. I just think the kids, I think that's why a lot of my students, the feedback I've gotten has been that they've really enjoyed it. And even though they want to be back in person, is because I've kept it. They're used to playing the scales. They're used to going through the music. Like the routine is the same. I do the same activities, maybe modified. Give yourself some grace because you know it's not going to be easy and it's not always going to work. Like I can't tell you how many times I've talked on mute and the kids are like, we can't hear you. Or, you know, I spend all these hours putting something into Sibelius and then I go to screen share the sound and they're like, that doesn't match. You know, they give grace and I give grace and we kind of just laugh about it. I think when you kind of give that culture, then the students are more willing to, they know that you're going to make mistakes and they're going to make mistakes. And then your environment online is a little bit more welcoming and forgiving. Ask other teachers, borrow things from them. Don't be down your, that's, you know, that would be if you were in person anyway. Like don't recreate everything. Like go ask people, what are you doing in your classroom? Can I borrow that? Oh, I'm doing that with another colleague. We're using the same jazz music. So we don't have to create, he's at another high school in town. We don't need to create that many click tracks, right? So does it matter if your high school and my high school jazz band's playing the same piece during distance learning? Not really. So let's, you know, use each other's resources and what's working and not working. And really just remembering to build connections with your students because this is a hard time. And so it's okay to take 5 minutes and be like, how was your weekend? And then they're all going to sit and stare at you on mute and it's really awkward. And then you have to say, you know, unmute, somebody tell me about your weekend. And, you know, you would do that in person anyway, but they need those breaks to be able to be a little bit silly and know that like they're still in that classroom that allows them that downtime a little bit. And so I think that that's really important too, especially during this time.
So with an in-depth look at a lesson that was recently taught, I'd like to introduce you to Peter Reinman. They are at Menlo Atherton High School teaching choir and guitar in Menlo Atherton, California. Thank you so much, Peter, for joining us today here and sharing with us what you're doing online. You're going to be sharing a lesson with us that you have just recently taught. And first, if you could just tell everyone who's listening a little bit about where you're teaching and what you're teaching.
Yeah, so I teach at Menlo Atherton High School. I teach both choir and guitar. It's my first year at this school site, but my 4th year teaching.
Excellent. And why don't you go ahead and your learning management system is Canvas, so we can see you've got your Canvas layout here. Could you walk us through the lesson that you were just working on?
Sure. So how I have my Canvas organized is just that every week I have a module for that week and everything that you would need, the lesson, the homework is inside that module. The lesson that I gave today Tuesday lesson, intervals, and solfege attack. I always start with the agenda, and the icebreaker today was, what's a quality you really appreciate in other people? Bonus, who is a person that possesses that quality? And so I put everyone in a breakout room for 3 or 4 minutes with about 3 or 4 people in it. And the reason that I've been doing this is I noticed that cameras have been off. And to force, and I even tell the students, I say, it's time for your favorite part of the day, forced interaction. And so they know, like, okay, we're expected to interact. And so this is turning cameras on and getting the students primed for being engaged in the lesson. So this is new and it's working really well, the icebreaker. Next up, explaining intervals. So what I have here is we would have just sang through this. So far we've only been singing on solfege, and now I want to sing on numbers because we're going to talk about intervals. So we sang through it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then we also did 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. And then I just talked about how from do to re is a second. I know it's just one step, but it's a second. And every time you move from one note to another, it's some type of second. From re to mi is some type of second. From mi to fa is some type of second. And then we talked about thirds. From 1 to 3 is a third. It's some type of third. And no matter when you do that kind of skip, no matter where you are on the scale, it's a third. And then on we meet twice a week, and actually we meet 3 times a week it's like a weird block schedule, but we meet and then we have an asynchronous day where they do work without teachers, and then we meet again. And so on the asynchronous day, they're going to take a quiz about intervals, but it's a repeatable quiz. And so it's more a tool so that they can try over and over again to understand this thing. And that's how all of my assignments are, is that you can try as many times, and there is no, late work is okay. It's okay if you don't turn this in right away. All right, next up on the agenda, we're gonna do some sight reading. And so I actually have it already embedded in my lesson. And how I would do this is we use Takadimi. And I would ask a student, hey, Molly, will you ta this for us, is what I say. And I would tell her, hey, actually extra points if you also, we do this system, I'm sure a lot of you do, which is like ta, ta, di, ta. And I started using this thing. I've used it before, but I started using it in distance learning, especially because I can see on the screen that they're on beat. Yes, there is latency, but I do see that they're at least moving and trying, right? In class, I would have had us ta, ta, di, ta, like that. But this just works really well. So we would have had one student ta it, and then really no one's performing with them. It's really just a check for understanding with that student. And I would set it up to make them feel really comfortable by saying extra points if you fail. Like, you better fail. Like, somewhere in here, I hope you mess up because extra points. All right, so making sure that they feel really comfortable. And then I'd ask everyone to mute. Everyone's already been muted. There was just that one person demonstrating. And I would turn on the metronome, and I'd ask everyone to do it with me. Ready, go, ta, 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 di, ta, ta. And then we might ask questions like, how many up, downs, subdivisions are within this first half note? And so we'd work that out together, figure that out.
Very cool.
Yeah, so we do that as a level 1. It gets a little bit harder. Level 2, same idea, is I ask one student to perform it, and then everyone chants along with me. After rhythm, we're gonna do some pitch, and we do a few different steps. First things first, what are the solfege syllables? So, hey, Shawnee, what are the solfege syllables for this example? And so she would go through and say, do. I would probably have to give them the first note. The first one is do. Do, mi, do, re, mi, sol, fa. Good, good, good. Now our next thing we would try to do is chant the solfege in rhythm. So I would pick a different student. Hey, you know, Kara, will you chant it in rhythm? And so she would do, mi. And then the next one I might do is, can someone just sing the tone set? And what I want is to be able to just find all the pitches. So do, if that's do, mi, re, sol, fa, mi, do. That's our tone set. Those are all the tones that we will use in this thing. And then I would ask a student to try to sing it, maybe just 2 measures. And then I would sing it and say, okay, everyone sing along with me. All right, here we go, ready, go. And I might use a metronome or I might just slap my chest. So we've done rhythm, we've done pitched now, and that's it for sight reading. And that can take quite some time. That can, you know, that's like a 10-minute process even sometimes. So next up on our agenda, we're at dictation. And this is a really fun way to do dictation. And I will share this link with y'all. It's a Google slide. And they have to click, the students will click, make a copy once they click that link. I'll drop it in the Zoom chat for them. And what this is 2 measures of music, 2 4-beat measures of music. Well, they're blank right now. But what I'll do is I'll go do, 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 do. The students then have to drag do, 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 do. I probably would have sang it like 5 times before they are able to start like actually filling it in. And what I do is I keep my screen open for them so that we can kind of, I'm teaching them to have landmarks within a melody. Like, okay, I knew that it ended da, da, da. So if I knew that it ended, let's fill in that, you know, that part was easy. And so I just ask students to do whatever they can. I'll call on someone, hey, George, will you, can you sing any of it? And he'll be like, yeah, I got this much of it. Okay, cool. Or, could you know any of the rhythm? Would you know any of the solfege? And so just starting to piece together that like, once we know a few points of this, like we can start filling in the rest. And this, you have to Control Z. Don't delete on this document, I tell them, because these stickers are not unlimited. By the way, I stole this from Genevieve Tepp, who teaches in our district. I modified this from Genevieve Tepp, who has a fabulous choral program.
Do you have students, do they then share their copy back with you, or how do you?
Yeah, so great question. Eventually, what I'll do is I'll have a dictation test one day, but not anytime soon. So no, what I do allow for is I say, hey, take 60 seconds, open up your Google Drive, delete this copy so that you don't have a bunch of random stuff floating around your Google Drive. So I'm trying to embed that in my teaching. Sometimes I forget to.
It's a great tip.
Yeah. No one wants to see my Google Drive. All right, the next thing we did, I did like 5 rounds of that thing today. Next thing I did was, it's very similar to this. I'll share this copy too. Is solfege attack. Given the first solfege, finish the example. So they just drag and drop. And there are two pages of this worksheet, right? And so here's what I do is, this was the very last thing that we did in class. One of the very last things. But I ask the students to share their screen with me before they leave. Once you share your screen with me, you can go. And I actually did have them turn this one in. You don't have to have them turn it in though. Like, I just want to see that you did the work, right? But the reason I had them turn this one in is multiple parts. One, is that I realized that there were students that were not connecting with me at all. And I don't get to grab them at the door like I normally would and be like, hey, you're sitting in the back of the class with your hood on and your sunglasses on all the time. Like, let's connect. This is now my way to do that. This is me walking over to their desk and they share their screen. And in fact, they share their screen with the whole class. It would be okay to put them in a breakout room, like put every single person in a breakout room. But whenever a student might get something wrong, and then I get to explain it in front of the class, and they're stealing the answers from other students, and I like that. I want us to be doing that exact thing. So number one was, they're sharing their screen with me. There's multiple things I'm trying to say at once. They're sharing their screen with me because it's just like me walking over to their desk. And now they have to actually say my name, like, hey, Reinman, I'm ready for you to look at my work. And the reason that I'm having them turn it in during class is because I realized that anything that is done outside of class has like 50% less chance of getting turned in. They're just not turning in work. So on the asynchronous day, I'm only doing fun things. Or for homework, it's only fun things. And if I'm asking them to turn in anything, it's done in class because there are just students who aren't getting it done. And, you know, we have to return to the idea that we're in a pandemic and we can't possibly know how these students are affected by this situation. So, you know, I'm only asking for work when they're in class now because I want every student to succeed. We are, in fact, teaching music and it should be fun. And if you, in my personal opinion, if you have more than 6 people getting a B or lower in your class, I think that the teacher is doing something wrong. It's so easy to do well in music. So how do we make the assignments interesting? Or how do we make the policies interesting or accessible for all students during a pandemic, right? So that was pretty much all we did in class, but we did also talk about our Wednesday assignment. Now, back to the agenda. Our Wednesday assignment is a sound trap assignment. And I asked them to replace Reinman's melody and harmony track to the song Teach You by Emily King. Now, I recorded it all cool for them, but I recorded it on Soundtrap and then I put a video to it. And the reason I did this is because I'm trying to catch their eye. I'm trying to show them what we're doing in class is Instagrammable. All right.
1, 2, 3. Do I have to explain? Care to somebody love? Call them up on the phone when you feel blue. Light up with words.
So you hear guitar, voice, and now one more voice.
Do I have to explain? I care to somebody trust.
Okay. So what I asked them to do is replace my voice and my 2 voice parts. So they click on this link. Soundtrap does cost money. It's probably about $300 for a class. It's worth it. I don't know if it's worth it for a virtual choir thing. I haven't had too much success with that. But also, here's my philosophy around virtual choir stuff right now is that as the students are learning and they hear something wrong in the choir, it's probably someone else's fault, is their idea. But if they hear something wrong on their own song that no one else is singing on except for themselves, it's their own fault. So when they're struggling with internal pulse, they realize it because there's no one else on this track except for themselves. So this is what it looks like. It's just like GarageBand. Here's the guitar part. Here's my melody. Here's my harmony. And then I asked them to just like delete my voice or add a new track. And, you know, maybe they're using my voice as a learning track. And the things that they're learning here are like non-resonant singing. We are in our homes. Children have babies next door sleeping or apartment neighbors. Don't ask your students to do resonant singing in a house. It's crazy. So we have to know how to do pop singing, how to do off the voice singing. It is legitimate style. So I'm not going to ask my sopranos to be above, you know, C5. I'm just not going to. It's silly. Very, very, very silly. So let's see. what else do I have to say about that?
Is this a very intuitive program? Like, did your students kind of pick up on how to do it really quickly because it is similar to GarageBand, or was there a learning curve on it?
Okay, yeah, our kiddos are quite quick, but some of them take a little bit longer. What I did is I made a Loom, and Loom is very cool. It allows you to record your screen and also like has a bubble in the corner of your face. So I made a Loom of how to use it. And so just like simple things like turn off the monitor, turn on the metronome, you know, how to add a track. So it took 10 minutes. Okay, that's a lie. It took an hour because everything these days takes so long to create lessons. So it took an hour and I created this, you know, a project for them, or a how to use this tutorial. Any other, how can you guide me? I can show you what the, what it looks like in Soundtrap.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Okay. So I can create an assignment in Soundtrap, and obviously you can't grade in Soundtrap. So what I do is also create an assignment on Canvas. And I just say like, hey, record your thing and then write a 1-sentence reflection about it, right? Each assignment that you create on Soundtrap will create a folder like this. And then each one of these will be a student's name. And then you don't even have to open the studio. You can just listen. Anyways, and then you can grade. It's like super fast to grade like that as well. Or if you're not even listening to them and you're just grading on Canvas, they should have submitted a sentence to say, hey, I did the assignment. So.
What advice would you have for, we have new teachers who will be seeing this, we have experienced teachers. What advice would you give to teachers about online teaching?
You know, so what I'm trying to do is speak to the students on their level. Like, what can I do that is Instagrammable, right? So like, how do I do some type of, like, if it's a body percussion thing, how do I wow them? Like, how do I capture their hearts and their minds and have them want to do the project, right? So instead of, you know, I think that a lot of teachers decided that they would do like, you know, we're going to do theory-based because that's such an easy thing to just give out worksheets. But I mean, especially me, I'm a performer. I want to perform. And so let your students do that thing and find the material that is interesting for them to do, right? So I think that that would be my my biggest advice is that, like, let's be doing fun things right now. Let's be doing Instagrammable things right now. Let's be doing things that we can show our mom, that we can show our cousin. Like, it should be exciting. We're in a very stressful situation. My parents' home is right now evacuated while we're also in a pandemic. Like, this is crazy. So I hope that this is a space where the kids can come and feel like, oh, I'm so glad. Oh, I'm so glad I'm here.
What was interesting to me as I was participating in these two interviews was that, first and foremost, music educators in California are doing amazing things with online work right now. And one of the things I thought that I could possibly offer up with my own experience as a singer and as a professor of education, specifically my areas of research are on technology and assessment, was to maybe offer up a model of student self-assessment for use in performance. So when we take a look at how to get students to self-assess, it's actually not a very natural process. We, by nature, especially in the K-12 school system in the United States, tend to really have extrinsic assessment rather than intrinsic or self-assessment. So I'm going to be explaining 5 steps to you on how we can guide students to actually self-assess performances And this will all be surrounding the idea of using video as a tool for self-assessment. So step 1 is actually having a quality informative rubric. Step 2 is now using that rubric as the center for clarification and calibration. Step 3 is helping students set their own objective. Step 4 is guiding students to recording and reflecting on their performance. And step 5 is starting that iterative process of setting achievable goals moving forward. So with step 1, the first thing we want to do is find or create a rubric with 3 primary qualities. First and foremost, the rubric needs to be really descriptive. And from a point of view of an educator, I've been an educator for 25 years, what we really want is a rubric that describes what is there. Right? When we're giving students guidance, and especially when they're reading that guidance without you there to support them, telling them when something's missing doesn't tell them what should be done instead. So when we're looking at a really good rubric, it's very descriptive and it's describing what the student can observe. It is not a not rubric, it's a descriptive rubric. Then the rubric itself actually represents a progression, right? So as you read across the columns, either from left to right or right to left, there's a developmental trajectory for a student's particular performance, for the criteria that you're looking at in a performance. And third, the really, really important quality is that your rubric is objective. And so when we take a look at objectivity, you want to ask yourself, how likely is it that 2 different people would score the same performance differently? If the answer is yes, then go back to the description. Some key words that you want to watch out for when we're looking for objectivity instead of subjectivity are things like enough, good, adequately, poorly, any of those words that could be, interpreted differently by 2 different scorers. We want to try and refine what exactly do we mean by enough? What exactly do we mean by adequate? And when we get to that refinement, we change the language in the rubric. So you can either find or create or find and tweak. That's my go-to, a rubric. So for the purpose of this example, we're going to be using the Carnegie Hall Vocal Music Performance rubric. I've got the link up here. And I also put a link in the slides, which will be shareable for you. So one of the things I want to point out here is that in the progression, they've actually gone from try again to standing ovation. So actually describing what each of those levels of practice would look like. This rubric violates my nots for the try again. And it is possible to do a performance that doesn't make it onto the rubric. And that's actually, for me, a better place for an engaging conversation with a student than having them see diction is not understandable. Well, okay, so what exactly does that mean? If what I'm hearing, I understand, I have a hard time understanding something like your vowels are muffled, or you are slurring, or you're, whatever it is, this doesn't give me enough information to help me truly be able to fix the problem. So what I would do if this were my own class, I would probably take the try again out and have students analyze for themselves, if they aren't on one of the other 3 levels, what is it that's causing them to not be on that level, and have that rich discussion to help them move forward in their learning. So once you've found that rubric and made it a useful rubric, then there are some important things to do with your class. And this all has to happen before we ask students to do a self-evaluation. We need them to all be clear and calibrate on the rubric. So when we talk about clarity, the first thing you want to do is have everyone read the rubric. They can read it silently to themselves. And what I would suggest is, while they're silently reading it to themselves, they like circle or highlight or underline words that they are not clear about what that means. Either they understand the definition, but not what it looks like or sounds like, or they don't have any idea what that term means. And so once they've read the rubric, open up to have a little bit of conversation around what that language really means. Then, as a group, question the rubric together and make any changes that might be necessary for the rubric to become more clear and usable for the students. Then what you want to do is you want to participate together in a calibration process. So choose a short sample video, watch that sample piece together, and then each person, each student and the teacher would all score the sample on one or more of the criteria and writes why they would give that score. So you do that sample scoring, you jot down notes. It's not something that they're going to turn in. It's just they want to remind themselves why they would give that score to that piece. Then everyone comes together to discuss and come to consensus on the scores before moving on. So this is the whole purpose of step number 2, is to make sure that my idea of a 2 is the same as your idea of a 2 within reason, that we're at least, you know, adjacent. If we're not exact, we're adjacent. If you give it a 2, I'm giving it a 3 or a 1. And we can even start language like high 2s and low 2s. That's a whole thing we won't get into here. So this is an essential piece to using rubrics to have students self-assess on a performance piece. So for instance, here we would discuss things like, what is phrasing? What is an inconsistency? As a student, I may or may not know what an inconsistency is, and that comes up quite frequently. Phrasing, inappropriate, breathing, what exactly are we talking about? Musically phrasing and accurate phrasing, what does that look like or sound like? So kind of getting those pieces together so that the students know what they're doing when they are going to score. The third thing that you want to do is you want to help your students set an objective for their own performance and the watching of the performance and the evaluation of the performance. When we look at performance rubrics tend to have lots of criteria, because when we think of a performance, there are so many little pieces and nuances to that performance that it's not all going to fit in one row, right? We want to be able to separate those things out. So guide students, instead of trying to do a performance and an observation on all of the things, have them isolate 1 or 2 criteria, and that's going to be their goal area for working on from this piece to the next piece or to the next practice of that piece. They're just looking at 1 or 2 elements to help focus and really be able to drill down to an area where they can see their own growth. So you want to guide them to finding something that they want to develop. It's not something that they're going to give themselves the A on. It's something that they want to actually find and develop in their own practice. So 1 or 2 criteria, definitely tell students that by the end of the year, they're going to touch on all of those criteria. They're just going to do it 1 or 2 criteria at a time. So then the student, after they've chosen those criteria, they're going to kind of think about what their own goal is for the performance of those elements, and remind them that those goals need to reflect students' desire for where and how they're going to actually measure growth. So my goal might be this today, and in my next recording, I want to move to here. So for this purpose of example here, the example I have is I have my goal as a singer that I would like to be at the level 3 for phrasing, demonstrates understanding of musical phrasing with some inconsistencies in song and text emphasis. And I want to be at least a number 2 for demonstrates limited understanding of tempo and is frequently inconsistent. So now when I watch this video, I may make mistakes in pitch. I may make mistakes in pronunciation. But what I'm really paying attention to this time are these 2 elements. And I'm really going to be trying to aim for my goal of these 2 ratings. So the next step is to ask students to record their performance, remind them that each performance is representative of just a moment in time. It's the day that's happening today. It's whatever happened in your life today. This is not their overall skill or potential. This isn't who they are as a human being. That this is actually just a way for us to look at, here's where I am today, right now. Okay, so this is extremely important so that students don't self-internalize and get too harsh on themselves. Then they're going to watch and score their own video using the rubric, and if possible, annotate. So on that note, I'd like to show you how you can use an add-on tool in Canvas to record and then annotate a piece of performance. You can find annotation tools all over. I'm using Canvas and this particular tool in Canvas because that's what we use at San Jose State University. So when we go into Studio, this is my video library. You can see I have a video of myself here. I also have videos that I use in my class for my students to be able to, I teach teacher education, so they watch other teachers teach. When you are in Studio, you also have the option here in the upper right-hand corner to record. So I can record a screen capture, which is what I am doing right now, or I can create a webcam capture. So when I click on this as the webcam, and this is what your students would do, it will open up a bar here, and you can see, is it ready to start recording? It actually does not like, I'm recording this in Zoom, and Studio doesn't like that. So it won't actually show you the picture right now, but you could click the start recording button and it will make a recording. And I'm going to discard that. So you can see I have here my sample video, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to take a look at this video. And the thing that I like about this particular app is that it allows annotation. So it not only does it record and capture your performance on screen, but it has this comment feature. And with the comment feature, I'm, again, remember, looking for tempo, and we'll take a quick listen. There is a house in New Orleans they call the rising sun. So if I pause right here, I know I need to work on the word ruin so that I can have it be a little bit more clear, and the phrasing there is a little wonky. So what I can do is come down here to the comment box, okay? And now what's groovy is here, it actually tells you it's going to comment at point 17. So if your students are doing self-evaluation and they submit this video to you, you can actually go directly to where it is in the video they want you to pay attention. So your students are able to reflect on, things that they think they've done well. They can put in here little bubbles like pop-ups for where they want to improve. And it really does help them stay focused on the performance, not just, I felt like it went really well, I felt like I did really poorly, which are both very important things, but they don't help us isolate and improve on what it is we want to improve. So having students use this to annotate where in the videos they are enjoying what they're doing or they're doing what they're asked to do is really a powerful thing. All right, so according to my rubric, I have actually flip-flopped my analysis of myself and my rating of myself using this rubric. My goal was to demonstrate understanding of musical phrasing with some inconsistencies in text emphasis, and I felt like my breathing was off. I was kind of inappropriate on my timing, so I actually gave myself a 1 instead of a 2. But the good news is, on the second element, tempo, I felt I did really well on that. So my goal had been a level 1, or a level 2, but I actually thought I got a 3. So I can then score myself, give my reasoning, and ground that in the evidence of the annotation. And that provides a really great opportunity for us as educators to view the student's self-assessment and give feedback through probing questions, right? So, oh, I noticed that you did this here and you said this. What do you think about, right? So then the fifth thing that we want to have our students do is to write a reflection, and we want to make sure that they're always highlighting what they did well and 1 or 2 areas in which they want to grow. Students will naturally go directly to the things they did wrong. So we want to try and help them find what they did right. So this is just a quick table, something that I might ask my students to do. Again, this is about empowering students. Self-assessment shouldn't be how close can I get to what the teacher wants, but it should be how am I developing as a lifelong learner and an independent learner? How am I developing as a musician who is driving my own development of musicianship? So in this little chart that I would give my students, I would have them have a goal written in their own words. Then I would ask them to set up some deadlines for what progress they want to make on that goal. And then think about realistically, it's great to have goals, but we also need a plan to get there. And we need to figure out what resources we need to make that plan happen. So then I would ask students to write down and think about what is it that you need from yourself in order to achieve that goal. And they're not in this alone. What do they need from their teacher, from their peers, or from their family? You know, when we're talking about being able to do a performance that shows the feelings of the song, they need to have a little feedback on that. So maybe they need someone to talk about the lyrics with. Maybe they need feedback on the performance when they're ready to do their, you know, their dress rehearsal performance right before they record. So this is just kind of a groovy chart that I came up with that I would give to my students to have them really think about not just the goal and what their timeline is for it, but where are they actually going to find the resources to achieve that goal. So I'd like to thank you very much for joining me today for this webinar. I'm Dr. Lara Ervin-Kassab. Here is all of my contact information. Here are some of the links that were cited today, and I will also include this slideshow in the materials. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.